by reading a bit from the beginning. White people in North America live in a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race, and white people are the beneficiaries of that separation and inequality. As a result, we are insulated from racial stress at the same time that we come to feel entitled to and deserving of our advantage. Given how seldom we experience racial discomfort in a society we dominate, we haven't had to build our racial stamina. Socialized into a deeply internalized sense of superiority that we either are unaware of or can never admit to ourselves, we become highly fragile in conversations about race. We consider a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very identities as good moral people. Thus, we perceive any attempt to connect us to the system of racism as an unsettling and unfair moral offense. The smallest amount of racial stress is intolerable. The mere suggestion that being white has meaning often triggers a range of defensive responses. And these include emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and withdrawal from the stress-inducing situation. These responses work to reinstate white equilibrium as they repel the challenge, return our racial comfort, and maintain our dominance within the racial hierarchy. I conceptualize this process as white fragility. Though white fragility is triggered by discomfort and anxiety, it is born of superiority and entitlement. White fragility is not weakness per se. In fact, it is a powerful means of white racial control and the protection of white advantage. So I'm pretty sure I'm speaking to a room filled with white progressives. So let me just be clear, you are not the choir. There is no choir. I am not the choir. When I say there is no choir, it's because my learning will never be finished. And this moment I think I'm the choir, I think I'm going to be done and I'm going to have certitude. I often joke, but on some levels it's kind of true. When I first applied to be that diversity trainer back in the early 90s, I thought, well, of course I'm qualified to lead discussions on racism. I'm a vegetarian. How could I be racist? Now, I would need to be vegan today, but, you know, in the 90s, that was pretty alternative, right? I even got called a communist once when I said, no, I'm a vegetarian. But, you know, my point is I just thought it was all about open-mindedness and alternativeness. And let me just say that, you know, I love Seattle, and everything I learned about white fragility, I learned here working with white progressives. So, Chapter 1, Challenges to Talking to White People About Racism. All right? I have never met a white person who did not have an opinion on racism, have you? If you are not sure that all white people have opinions on racism, just bring it up the next time you're around a bunch of white people. Maybe tonight when you have a drink in Ballard after the talk. And see how that goes. Not only do we all have opinions, but they tend to be very emotionally charged, and that has nothing to do with whether they're informed or not. I have an opinion on virtually everything. That does not make them informed. I don't believe you can grow up or spend any significant time in the United States without developing opinions on racism, and they will be emotional and strongly held. And again, that has nothing to do with whether they're informed. And in fact, if you are white and you have not devoted years of sustained study, struggle, and focus on this topic, your opinions are necessarily very limited. And no, a trip to Costa Rica, multiracial nieces and nephews, right? These are not sustained study, struggle, and focus. Now, how can I say that when I don't know most of the people in this room? And this, of course, is the first thing that tends to trigger white fragility, generalizing about white people. As a sociologist, I'm really comfortable generalizing about white people. Social life is predictable and patterned, you know, in really observable ways, and we've got to grapple with those patterns. But I can say this, that your opinions without sustained study, struggle, focus, you know, mistake-making, relationship building, repair, they're superficial because nothing in society gives you the information you need to have more than that. In fact, you can get through graduate school in this country without ever discussing racism, can you not? You can get through teacher education in this country without discussing racism. And if you're in a progressive teacher education program, you'll have one required multicultural education class. But that doesn't mean you'll be talking about racism. You might just be talking about how to introduce ethnic authors in February. Right? You can get through law school, you can get through social work, right? You can be seen as qualified to lead a major or minor institution in this country, to lead a group of people, to supervise people. You can be seen as qualified to do those things with virtually no ability whatsoever to engage with any complexity or nuance in the issue of racism. Can you not? All right. So that is the first challenge, humility. Right? The second is individualism. Apparently, white people do not understand socialization. Because we really think that we are exempt from it. And of course, the irony of that is because we're socialized to value the individual, we put a lot of effort there, but we think that, you know, just because I say I am or want to be, I could be exempt from these forces. So that is another challenge. And again, generalizing, suggesting race has meaning for white people will often trigger white fragility. We think if we don't see it, it isn't there, and you haven't explained it to me yet enough so that I understand it, so I'm not really sure that could be valid. Right? And we tend to use our reactions as a way out. There is no way we're going to get where we need to go from a place of white comfort. And I am comfortable racially virtually 24/7. So that is not my goal, but we will often use that lack of comfort as a sign that something's been done wrong rather than something probably has been done right. And that we need to use that as a way in to the deeper framework that would cause such upset rather than use it as a way out. And we don't understand racism as a system. So this is another key challenge, which leads me to chapter 2, which is racism and white supremacy. Racism is a system, not an event. Right? And it's the system we're in. And none of us could be, and none of us were exempt from its forces. Right? But the way we're taught to think of racism functions beautifully to not only obscure the system, but to exempt us from its forces, right? Or to have us believe we are exempted from its forces. Now, as a white person, I was raised to be racially illiterate, and I actually think all white people are raised to be racially illiterate in this culture. And in gaining racial literacy, I have had to understand not just the collective dynamics and dimensions of racism, but how racism impacts different groups who are perceived and defined as people of color, how it impacts them differently, right? So not all peoples of color experience racism differently. The things I've internalized about different groups is different, where and how they are positioned always in relation to whiteness or far away from whiteness, and how that manifests, right? All of that must be understood. But after a good 20 plus years of talking day in and day out to white people about racism, I feel very confident to say that there is something profoundly anti-black in this culture. And that nothing seems to turn white people's cranks of resentment, like thinking black people got something over on us that they didn't deserve. And the deeper belief is that they're inherently undeserving. I believe in the white mind, black people are the ultimate racial other, right? And that there are these bookends. And again, your perceived proximity to each end of that impacts how you're going to experience your racialization.